Welcome back to the Weekend Bible Study. We're glad you're here. We're making a fair approximation of a live Bible study in this. In some ways, it's better because you don't have to hit the precise time, and neither do I. Thank God for the internet and for technology. It makes possible things that Paul could only have dreamed about. Remember to send your questions and comments to me, Ron, at borntowin.net. I'm still pondering where I will go next when we finish Hebrews. I would even consider a topical Bible study if that's of any interest. I'm running out of books of the Bible that I haven't recorded in one form or another. Someone suggested a few days ago that I do the Gospel according to John. We got a whole radio series on John, and I feel like I ought to look somewhere else. I haven't done the Gospel of Luke as an independent study of Luke. I've covered everything in the Gospels in the Words of Jesus radio series. But if I were to do an independent study of the Gospel of Luke, I would close out the New Testament. We could do a giant album titled The New Testament According to Ronald Dart. It's exhausting to even think about listening to it, much less making it. I recorded a program Tuesday titled About the Messiah. It follows the theme of a set of programs I call What the First Christians Believed. This one is what they believed about Christ, about Jesus. It's what we have come to call Christology. The first Christians had a very high Christology, and they were a lot closer to events than we are. Last week's sermon has a similar theme, not quite the same, but you'll want to watch for that. Yesterday, I read 2 more chapters of the coming audio book of The Lonely God. Should be out before the feast, but please don't order it now. We have one question about last week's study, so get yourself organized. Our other questions will come at the end. I'll be right back. Stephen Fredrigill writes from Prohl, Iowa. My wife and I noticed a while back that the King James Version and the New International Version both render Hebrews 10:28 in the past tense, while the New American Standard Bible and the Jewish Bible, perhaps others, render the verse in the present tense. Do you think there's any significance to that, and do you think that verse 25 has any reference to the feasts? On that last question, yes, definitely. Contextually, he is talking about the Day of Atonement when he says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together. Actually, that's one where you just probably would very easily persuade yourself to stay home and take an extra nap in the morning and an extra one in the afternoon on the Day of Atonement. So, yeah, he's talking about definitely in reference to the feasts. Well, the Day of Atonement is not exactly a feast, but you know what I mean. As for the tenses, the New American Standard Bible of Hebrews 10:28 reads this way: anyone who has set aside the law of Moses dies without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. The New Revised Standard Version: anyone who has violated the law of Moses dies without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. Then there is the New International Version: anyone who rejected the law of Moses died without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, and of course the King James Version says died, past tense. Now there appears to be no doubt that the first verb in that sentence is past tense. Every translation renders it that way, and I think I did not check it personally in the Greek, but I'm pretty sure it is. Anyone who rejected, that's past tense, and the same is true of all of them. All of whatever verb they use for it, the first verb is past tense. If they rejected, despised, or anything else, the law of Moses. I wasn't able to check the tense of the second verb, but you should know that Greek tenses don't work exactly like ours. In this case, the first verb controls in this situation. The last verb speaks of what happens when the first verb prevails. Now, did you notice how I spoke in the present tense? I said the first verb controls, the last verb speaks. But see, they're not speaking now. They spake a long time ago. What it is present tense in the setting, in the time setting of the first verb. When in anything you do, and I do this all the time, if you move yourself and your readership and your audience into the past, you can then, in that past setting, speak in the present tense of the things that are going on. And I think that's commonly done. I didn't even realize I was doing it until an editor pointed it out in some of my manuscripts that no, this shouldn't be present tense, it should be past tense. There's a term for this when you actually use the present tense in the past, but I've forgotten what it is. But I move us into our mind's eye into the past, and then I speak of events in the present tense. But I'm not sure what hangs on the tense in any case. It may be a reference to suggest that the temple was still standing, but I'm not sure what the status of the death penalty was at this point in time. You just should know that the Greek verb tenses are not quite the same as ours. So it is tricky to build any kind of an argument that depends on the tense of verbs. Yeah, they do point to time, but they also point to the kind of action that's going on, whether it is punctiliar, as they call it, or whether it is linear, that is continuing and going on. And I've seen some really convoluted arguments that get built out of this. But you're really a lot safer in this case if you find a bunch of translations and you look at them and see, okay, what is the general idea going on here? And I think in Hebrews 10:28 you can look at it and see, yeah, what he's done, he's put us in the past, and he is speaking in the present tense in the past while it's all going on. Well, today we come to that wonderful 11th chapter of Hebrews, the faith chapter. So grab another cup of coffee and let's dive in. Now, if you review back over what we've covered so far, there's an interesting question that arises. Why does Paul embark on this discussion of faith at this point in this letter, when we consider who he is, who he's writing to, the motivations that caused him to start the letter in the first place? But it does seem that chapter 11 is a digression on the theme he raises at the end of chapter 10. Remember? Now the just shall live by faith. But if any man draw back, my soul shall have no pleasure in him. But we are not of them that draw back to perdition. We're of them who believe to the saving of the soul. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Like I say, a case can be made that what he does, he introduces faith, and then something comes to his mind. My impression of Paul is that most of these letters were not written with his own hand. He was writing standing up. He was writing pacing the floor. He had this poor scribe over in the corner trying to write this stuff down as he went lightning, through his thoughts, and he just strung things out. So faith. Yeah, now faith. What's faith? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Now, faith is another one of those words that's been overused to the point of abuse. Maybe better, overused to the point of losing meaning. The Greek word for faith, pistis, is related to the verb to persuade. In that sense, pistis, faith, is a persuasion. And we kind of use the word that way in our language, but I don't know if we think about it. Persuasion, then, faith, is the hypostasis of things hoped for. Now, I think both the NIV and the KJV miss the mark here. The word for substance in the King James Version is a combined form of hupo, under, and the verb that means to stand, hypostasis. Faith, then, is what we stand on. It's the evidence, the proof, or conviction of things that we don't see. I read a book some time ago, I think back in 1995, titled Of Two Minds by Os Guinness. The book was about the difference between doubt and unbelief, that every one of us go through life really in a way of two minds. He said his point was that you have doubts does not mean that you don't believe. This isn't the same thing as a settled mind of unbelief. Faith, then, does not mean you have no doubts. Faith means you decide to trust in spite of your doubts. It's kind of the spirit expressed by Admiral Farragut in the Battle of Mobile Bay back in the Civil War. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. He couldn't be certain he was going to get through, but he said, doesn't matter I get through or not, I'm going. It's the same spirit expressed by the 3 Hebrew children when they faced the fiery furnace, and they said, look, you kids, bow down here. If he didn't do it, he's going to throw you into this furnace burning with fire. And the 3 Hebrew children said, our God will deliver us from the fire. Then he said the real clincher, even if he doesn't, Be it known to you, we will not bow down. Now, some people confuse faith with certainty. But if you are certain, faith is not needed. The 3 Hebrew children had faith. They did not have certainty, which is why they went on with that second part of the statement, even if God doesn't deliver us, which is a possibility, we're still going to stand for Him. Faith, then, is not a feeling. It is a conscious decision. It is a commitment. And I think this is really important. You understand, I think, that courage does not mean you have no fear. Because if you have no fear, you have no need of courage. Courage means you act in the face of fear. Now, taking this little bit of information on with Hebrews 11. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good report. Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. Mind you, faith does not hang in midair. It has evidence. It has substance to it. We have a persuasion that's going on here. Someone has sat down and explained to us, yeah, the world was created by God, and here are the reasons for it. And we listen through that, and we come to the conclusion that while I can't see it, and while I may not be able to prove it to a person who's a determined unbeliever, I'm going to order my life on the assumption that it's true. He goes on to say, by faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he, being dead, still speaks. Now here's a question for discussion. First, I want you to pause the presentation I'm doing now and read the 4th chapter of Genesis. When you have read it, here's the question I want you to answer. Why did God respect Abel's offering and not Cain's? Was it because Cain did not offer maybe according to this or that sacred law? Was it because Cain's offering was not a blood sacrifice? He offered vegetables. Or was it something else? Now, you can freely discuss this on the CEM forum. There's a section there devoted to the weekend Bible study. And you can also email your comments to me about what you concluded. And, of course, if there's more than one of you there, you can have a little discussion about this. Kick it around for a while. If there's nobody else there, you get to kick it around all by yourself. By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation he had this testimony, that he pleased God. Now, books have been written about the translation of Enoch, that he was moved from one place to another. It does not mean that Enoch is still alive somewhere else. He's in the grave, moldering away like everybody else is, their body, and he will come up in the resurrection. Why? Because he pleased God. But without faith, it's impossible to please him. For he that comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Now, you can begin, if you think about this for a moment, you can understand why the deists come out on the short end of the stick. These are people who believe in a creator. They believe God started all this stuff. He wound up the universe like a clock and went off and left it. And it's been winding down ever since. But that doesn't work, according to Hebrews. You not only have to believe that he is, you have to believe that he is a rewarder of them who diligently seek him. And of course, that's why you and I study the Bible. We are diligent in looking for God. We want to understand what he is doing, what he stands for, what his goals are. And so we diligently seek for him on the assumption that there is a reward at the end of the search. By faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet. In other words, Noah had not one hint environmentally of any problem that was out there ahead of him. But he, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness which is by faith. This is terrific when you understand what this means. Bill Cosby did a great comedy routine about Noah. I have a feeling if you go up looking for his CDs on eBay or something like that, you can find it up there, and it is definitely worth the time to listen to. He presents Noah as only Bill Cosby can do it, working in his shop. I think he is sawing on a piece of lumber. And there's a ding, and a voice says, "Noah." And he stops. And then he just goes on sawing some more. And then comes the ding, and the voice again saying, "Noah." And he says, "Who is this?" And he gets this thing, "It's the Lord." And then there's this pause, and he says, "Who is this really?" The whole routine goes on like that. And Noah is very skeptical about this idea of building an ark. And every once in a while he'll say, "Right, right." But then there comes a place where he hears the thunder. And the voice asks, "Noah, how long can you tread water?" After that, it's you and me, Lord. But Noah had nothing but God's word and a 100-year project. Apparently it took him that long to build this boat. And considering the scope of the whole project, that's not nearly too much time. But could he be certain of what was coming? Well, hardly. What he could do was build. And this is the key. This is the thing you have to understand about faith. Once you understand what God wants from you, you don't have to see the results. You don't have to have it all laid out for it. What you have to do is just do it. There are times when you have to call out to God and say, "Father, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I can't really tell. It looks to me like I should turn left. And so, therefore, I'm going to do it. And if it turns out to be wrong, I hope you'll show me quickly and gently because I'm trying to do the right thing." You can live that way with God. And what you do is you move. By faith, Abraham, now we're at verse 8, when he was called to go out to a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, and obeyed, and went out, not knowing where he was going. Now, to me, this is the operative phrase in this whole thing and the key to understanding what's going on. It is one of the most important things you will ever learn about faith. You will rarely know where God is going when you set out. You have to embark, to commit, to trust, to go on and get it done. I will all my life remember an occasion. We were traveling across country with a friend's wife and his children was traveling with us because we were going in the right direction. And we came to a town where we decided to stop for the night. We got in rooms, and there was a pool. I was out in the pool, and the kids came running out to the pool. You know how kids are with a swimming pool. This was great fun. But the little boy couldn't swim, and he's very timid about this whole thing. And he stood on the side of the pool, and I held out my hand and says, "Here, come on, jump." And finally, I think his name was Jimmy, finally, at long last, he decided he'd take a chance on me, and he launched himself into the air. I caught him. I let him come down and get dipped real good in the water, and I pulled him back up again, and he sputtered a bit, and he decided that was great fun. So I put him out on the edge of the pool, and we did it again. Well, I sent him off to play in the shallow end of the pool for a while, and I was doing my thing out there, and somebody hollered my name, and I turned around, and here was Jimmy in midair. He had launched while I had my back turned on him toward me in the confidence that I was going to catch him. The lesson I took from this is that God can make even a doubtful decision work. But here's the clincher. If you won't decide, then he may not decide either. And there you sit in limbo. One of the most important, pivotal points in my life, I came to this conclusion. When I finally realized that God had shown me everything he was going to show me, he was not going to make the decision for me. What he wanted from me was a decision. I made the decision and never looked back. And he made it work. Now, I think it's possible he could have made the other way work. It also might have involved a lot more pain for me and discomfort. I don't have any way of knowing. All I know is I did, according to my best lights, what I thought was right, and God said, I can work with that. By faith, Abraham sojourned in the land of promise as in a strange country, living in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. This guy left a city and spent the rest of his life living in tents. He looked for a city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Abraham had left a city. He looked for a new one. And I guess that's what we're supposed to be doing. Through faith also, Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Now, the whole story of this from Genesis is really kind of funny. Sarah standing in the tent door behind them as they were eating the supper, and God says to Abraham, I'll be back here next year at this time, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah, standing in the tent door, laughed. I don't think she laughed out loud. At least she didn't think she did. He laughed. And God says, why did Sarah laugh? I guess he was talking to Abraham because Sarah's hiding behind the tent flap. Sarah says, I didn't laugh. And God says, yes, you did laugh. And, don't ever tell me that God doesn't have a sense of humor or that God doesn't laugh. I am quite certain. I've been reading the book, The Gifts of the Jews, and his description of this episode is priceless, really. What is fascinating is that she even named her son Isaac, which means laughter. It's really a funny story. And the writer of Hebrews goes on to say in verse 12, Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, as many as the stars of the sky in multitude and the sand by the seashore innumerable. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off and were persuaded of them and embraced them and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. Now, tell me that Abraham and these people did not believe in a resurrection. They that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they'd been mindful of the country from which they came out, they could have gone back. But now they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. But they died in faith. And here's the question that kind of comes home to us. How long do you have to keep trusting God to keep his promises? I would have to say, as long as it takes. All the way to death. Because in fact, for Abraham and the others, the fulfillment of the prophet promises was not going to happen in this lifetime. It would have to be in the future. Verse 17, By faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, In Isaac shall your seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he received him in a figure. The whole episode of the sacrifice of Isaac was a metaphor in life. And don't imagine that Abraham was stoic, unmoved by what he was doing. He was not certain that he would not have to do the deed. He did believe that God would keep his word even if it required a resurrection. That is something to really think about. He did not believe he was going to stop him. He had no certainty about this thing. What he had was a commitment to do what God instructed him to do. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph and worshipped leaning on the top of his staff. Every one of these examples has a Bible study on its own. You can follow the chain references in your book, go back and read the story. They're all right there. By faith, Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel. He knew they were going to leave Egypt and gave a commandment concerning his bones. You carry me back and bury me with my father. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months by his parents because they saw he was a proper child and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. Yeah. This was a time, by the way, when they were taking all the male Hebrew babies and tossing them in the Nile to the crocodiles. So she put him in the Nile in that little basket that she made for him and floated him down where Pharaoh's daughter would find him. By faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, even though she had brought him up, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect to the recompense of the reward. Where did that come from? The reproach of Christ? The NIV says, reproach for the sake of Christ. What did the author of Hebrews think about Christ? Concerning really the way he and all the other New Testament writers spoke of Christ, meaning Jesus, this is a relatively simple construction. They talked about Christ this, Christ that. They're talking about Jesus. Now, for those who deny that Jesus existed before his human birth, there's a lot of backing and filling required over this particular verse. That the writer of Hebrews says, he esteemed having the reproach of Christ on him greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. Did he know Christ? In a sense, yes, he did. By faith Moses forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. I think what he means is not merely fearing the wrath of the king, because he saw something higher than that. Through faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. You know, that's another interesting one. Here's a little thing they were supposed to do that made no sense at all. What's the big deal about a little blood on the lintel of the house? It's kind of messy, isn't it? I can see some wife saying it didn't match the decor. Well, you know, sometimes, there's an old saying we used to have in the Navy, when all else fails, do as you're told, or follow instructions, or read the instruction book, or some version of that. Well, there's an awful lot to be said when you have clear instructions from God. Just get busy and do it. You'll figure it out later. By faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, which the Egyptians, attempting to do, were drowned. And boy, you know, that would take some. To stand on the bank of the Red Sea, seeing the water, even though the water is back, you know, standing like a wall on both sides, the nerve to walk down between those two walls? I don't know. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they were encompassed about for 7 days. And I can hear some of those people. Here they are marching around the city. It's the 7th day, 6 days that they've been doing this thing, and here we are, we're out here on the 7th day when nothing has happened. We blow the trumpets, we march around the city, we march back to camp, and we go to bed. This time, they march around the city that 7th day because after all, they were told to do it 7 times. And they did. The trumpets were blown, and there, to their wondering eyes, the walls of Jericho came down. Well, sometimes you have to keep on doing what you have to do for quite a little while before the results become evident. By faith the harlot Rahab perished not with them in Jericho, who believed not, when she received the spies with peace. She went further than that. She hid them on top of her roof and told people lies about where they had gone. She protected these men. And what shall I more say? Time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah and David. Oh, yes, there is David and Samuel, and of all the prophets who through faith subdued kingdoms. Oh, David did that. I mean, he put several kingdoms down. He was the first person in general in the history of the world who disarmed Iraq. And when the Syrians decided they would come and help, he disarmed the Syrians too. No, he put a stop to a lot of that nonsense. And there's a thing about David. When he got ready to go to battle, he would ask God, saying, "Shall I go and fight?" He would always ask the question before he went. And he went, and he won. These people worked righteousness. They obtained promises. They stopped the mouths of lions, like Daniel. They quenched the violence of the fire, like the 3 Hebrew children did. They escaped the edge of the sword. Out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, and turned to flight the armies of the aliens, as David did as a mere shepherd boy. Women received their dead raised to life again. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Now wrestle with that statement, you Sadducees, who don't think the ancients believed in a resurrection of the dead. The writer of Hebrews thought they believed in a resurrection of the dead, that they were tortured, and when they could have gotten off by simply saying the right word, they wouldn't do it. Why? Because they wanted a better resurrection. Others had trial of cruel mockings and scourgings, moreover of bonds and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, which legend has as the way Isaiah died. They were tempted, they were slain with the sword, they wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, afflicted, tormented. What a thing to have happen for the people of God! And he goes on to say, of whom, these people, the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and dens and caves of the earth. And these all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise. Why? God, having provided some better thing for us, that they, without us, should not be made perfect. In knowing the meaning of the word that is often translated perfect, that the excellence that is to be achieved in all of us is to be done together. Not one person here, not one person there. Hebrews 12 is a natural progression on this, as he starts off by saying, so, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, all these people are witnesses for us, let us lay aside every weight and the sin that does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of God. A cloud of witnesses indeed. And with all those examples of faith, we should be ashamed to flinch at our own challenges. But chapter 12 will have to wait till next week. We have some more questions to address today. Again, refresh your refreshments. I'll be right back. Our sympathy goes out to Rita Orgel of Palmetto, Florida this week. Her mother passed away. And she was saying that as her sister and she were driving to Kentucky, they got into a discussion about their bodies after death. Of course, she thinks Rita's sister thinks they go right to heaven. I told her, well, why would Jesus call the dead first and then us who are alive? Would they want to go back into the old body if they'd been living in heaven? Well, anyway, after I was thinking about our bodies that lay in wait for Christ to call us, well, if we are dead, I know we are having a new body at that time and do not need the old one. It made me think about, should I be cremated after death? Boy, that's a perennial question, and you certainly may be. The idea that somehow or other we would not be resurrected or wouldn't have a body in the resurrection, I think that's faulty. But he said Jesus did use his old body because his old body was not found. I do think that because people wouldn't believe it if it was still lying there. I am puzzled today about an opponent of this broadcast who claimed that I did not believe in the bodily resurrection of Jesus. If he wasn't raised bodily, what happened to the body? If he wasn't raised bodily, what were those wounds that he showed his disciples? He gave to Thomas, here, stick your finger in my hand. Push your hand in my side. He wanted them to see clearly and know who he was. So he was raised bodily. There's no question about that. There are some mysteries connected with this, but, I don't know that I can answer those. All I know is what we're supposed to do. Now, as far as cremation is concerned, I don't think that's relevant. I see nothing in the Bible to say that God would not raise people. I mean, what about people who have been eaten by animals? How are we going to get them back? Well, the complete record of your body, who you are, what you were, is in his files. And he can recreate it out of whatever it is that he needs to recreate it from. That's not a problem. People wonder, well, what if I had lost an arm in this life? Well, I don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us at all what we're going to do. But the indications, I think, are that we will be raised with our body, and our body will be whole. Beyond that, well, your guess is as good as mine. Charlene Pritt writes from Canton, Georgia, kind of a related question. When my dad died 7 years ago, she wrote, a friend gave me a book titled Beyond the Light. She told me if I read it, I would feel better. The book was about life after death and people who died for a short period of time and came back to life and told others what heaven was like. I also read the book 90 Minutes in Heaven, written by Pastor Don Piper. A few years ago, I met a woman who was an intelligent, kind, and gracious lady who had been very ill and died for several minutes, but was brought back to life in the hospital. She explained to me how she was always afraid to die until this happened to her. She claims she saw the face of Jesus and commenced to tell me how wonderful heaven was. You know, you really kind of wonder a little bit when you read this type of thing that people have been through, why they wanted to come back or why they aren't brokenhearted about being back. There have been hundreds, maybe thousands of these stories. These people seem to be sincere, and I think they really believe this stuff. I don't buy it because it's contrary to what the Bible teaches about death. My question is one of those questions that you're going to answer, I don't know. Some of you are catching up on me, it looks like. But nevertheless, I'd like your thoughts on this. If the dead know nothing, what are these people seeing? Do you think if they do see something, it is from Satan? Or do you think some of these people just want to sell books? Well, one option she didn't give me was all of the above. And in a way, I think that with that many people out there doing it, there probably is some all of the above in there. One thing I do think is over our lifetime, we have a whole set of ideas about heaven created in our mind by preachers we hear, by our own imagination, by things we read in the Bible, and so forth. And just as in sleep we dream, it's entirely likely that in the minutes after death we dream, because the brain function does not stop as soon as the heart stops, nor does time progress at the same way time progresses. It doesn't in dreams. Why should it be so in death? And so I would say there's a good chance that many of these people have experienced this in their minds as though it were real, when in fact it is really not much more than a dream. On the other hand, there is an idea that develops in people's minds about what happens to man at death, that we do go to a place of where God keeps all of us in sleep until the time of the resurrection. I see a lot in the Bible to support that. And if that is the case, then it's not completely unreasonable that there might be a short period of consciousness after death, like those where somebody, rises to the roof of the operating room and sees the doctors trying to save their life. Maybe. God knows. And Charlene is right. I don't. So I think we need to basically keep our minds open about this. But it is clear we're not up in heaven. The dead are not up there looking down on us right now, because how could they possibly be happy in heaven looking down on the mess that we're making of things here? No, the Bible presents them as asleep. And maybe, while we are asleep, we dream. And that may be the whole explanation of the stuff that you're hearing about. Nothing but dreams. Because until the resurrection, until the return of Christ, until we stand before Him on the judgment day, the outcome has not yet been determined. Well, think about it, pray about it, and maybe we'll talk again about it. We'll be with you next week.